So Amira, if you could pull up the 4-quadrant image. So I really want to dive into this. The first time I heard about this, correct me if I'm wrong, was it the first time you had talked about it publicly, really, was on Sam's podcast?
It was.
Okay, so on Sam's Waking Up podcast, which I'm sure most of my audience probably listens to, you described this 4-quadrant method, really, for looking at the world. And there's a great video of it on YouTube, but we're going to have you re-explain it, and maybe you can do it a little better this time. We shall see. So we're looking at it on the screen, so the audience can see it there. We've got copies in front of us, so that we don't have to extend our eyes too much. Talk to me about the 4 quadrants, because this made a lot of sense to me, but I can't tell you that I understood every piece of it the first time you explained it.
Terrific. So it came out of a frustration with left versus right thinking, which I think we all share. We still use it because it's slightly useful, but it's getting worse and worse as an approximation all the time. And I think what I was trying to figure out is a particular dynamic that is being used over and over again that we fall for, just the way Charlie Brown never manages to kick the football from Lucy. And so the idea is that you've got a collection of people that I want to concentrate on as living in the quadrant labeled first principles thinkers and contrarians. Mm-hmm. Now, these are people who are thinking for themselves and are not buying baked cakes. They're buying the ingredients, and they're saying, well, I want more of this ingredient, I don't like that ingredient. So they're attempting to avoid having any pre-baked idea put in front of them. And what you see on the x-axis...
So we're in the upper left quadrant, for
right,
those that are following along.
Right.
Yeah.
What you see on the x-axis is some visible support for a policy initiative. Are you for the DREAM Act? Do you believe in No Child Left Behind? Do you want the U.S. to accept more refugees? These are things that we can measure whether you're supporting or opposing a particular policy prescription. And on the vertical axis, what you have is some implied moral virtue or vice. So let's start with somebody like Brett. Okay, so Brett, I think, lives in the 2nd quadrant. On the x-axis, I'm going to put support for the equity agenda advanced by his college. So he clearly opposed that. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I'm going to put absence of racism on the y-axis. Mm-hmm. So I would say Brett is a guy with like almost zero racism and completely opposed to this equity agenda sneak attack. Mm-hmm. So the problem is...
So he's sort of done one good, one bad there in traditional thinking.
In traditional thinking.
Yeah.
Now what they want to do is to say, we can infer from your opposition to the equity agenda that your real Y value is extremely negative. That is, you are a racist. And you oppose these people because you singled out black females, strong black women who were trying to advance a good cause. And so that is the attempt to map from quadrant 2, first principles thinkers, contrarians, into quadrant 3. And you see this line, actual position, perceived position. Mm-hmm. So that's what they tried to do. They tried to create Brett the troglodyte, Brett the racist, and in fact, that narrative, which is you can tell how good or bad somebody is on racial or gender issues depending upon how much they go along with the agenda. And that is the media narrative. Mm-hmm. And that's what broke, right? Which was that the New York Times probably would say, look, this is part of identity politics. This is part of the Democratic Party. This is how we do things. We can't have people dining a la carte, buying ingredients. This is a baked cake. Take it or leave it. You either support the initiative and you're virtuous on race, or you oppose it and you're a bastard.
Right, because otherwise it's so contrary to everything else we put out there, it can't make it through the system.
Right. Now let's take somebody else. For example, let's take Sam Harris. Okay. So Sam Harris would normally live in quadrant 2 along with Brett. But here, for example...
Free thinkers.
Free thinkers. Yeah. Sam might oppose opening our borders for refugees coming out of failed states, particularly with Muslim majority populations. You would like, if you're part of the control structure, to say, well, that could only be because you're an Islamophobe. But my guess is, and I got Sam to admit this on his podcast, he seems to be a bit of an Islamophile. He's aware of the poetry, he's aware of the music, he's aware of the culture, he's got very close friends and collaborators who are active practicing Muslims. And so the idea is that Sam is I think he's probably an Islamophilic guy who's worried about the same thing his Muslim friends are worried about.
Just what he needs, another label.
What? Well,
Just what he needs.
But we're going to drag him out.
Yeah.
Right? And so the key point is that the dupes are the people who say, well, I can infer what Sam is really up to. He just wants a first strike against Muslims in the Middle East. Well, obviously he doesn't. That's stupid. Now, who's actually controlling this game? My claim is that it's these people in the fourth quadrant, which is rent-seeking elites. These are people who, for example, want to save a pension plan by increasing immigration because we're not reproducing and growth, is at a low. And so they, for example, may have a very kind of mercenary, self-interested view of why they want a border opened. Okay?
So that's the elite level. Where would you put like the people that relentlessly slam and smear him for their own good?
Those are the dupes.
Those are the dupes.
Those are the dupes, right?
Yeah.
And so the dupe army is going to come after you relentlessly for breaking ranks and saying, I want to dine a la carte, right? And so, for example, I don't see you as a Trump supporter. So if I did this, which would be like support for, how would I do you? So in this case, I might say, Dave is somebody who is opposed to the mainstream news narrative.
Absolutely.
And we want to, but he is extremely intellectual and very analytical and trying to figure things out for himself. And we would like to say that he's actually slid right. So you'll see a ton of stuff. Dave Rubin refuses to criticize X, Y, and Z. He's actually a right-winger. He's not a liberal, blah, blah, blah nonsense. Yeah. Now, what is this? Again, they're angry at you for, in some sense, dining a la carte. And over again, it's one trick, which is we want to break out these long-short positions, which is to say, I'm long Microsoft and I'm short Yahoo, versus somebody else who says, no, you can only be long tech, or you have to be against tech. You can't actually have a view that one tech company is on the way up and one tech company is on the way down. And so I believe that this diagram, we all need to understand it, because what's happening is that we're being attacked individually. Each one of us has a custom one of these fitted to us as to what's wrong with us. What's wrong with Eric that he's ragging on the New York Times? I feel like journalism is so important. Right. Well, of course I feel like journalism would be important. Somebody should invent it. I just don't see much of it. Right? And so it's not against that. It's a point of saying, I hold a long, short, nuanced position, and what are you going to try to do? The easiest way to neutralize me is to try to map me to the troglodyte sector. And how are you going to do that? It's always the same game. We have the right to infer what you're really up to from some bit of observed behavior. Thank you very much. Your words mean nothing. The nuances are all lost. We've got your number. Next, please. Yeah. The only way that works is that some of us are still dependent on institutions. So the institutions are still playing that game. But here, and this was my point to you earlier, here we are in a non-network. Right? We're in somebody's very professional studio, able to reach people so that I get recognized in airports and coffee shops. And the fact is we're out of control. And that's why they're coming for us now, is because they're starting to understand, well, what happens if Sam Harris and Dave Rubin and Eric Weinstein and Sargon Vakad and Lacey Green and Philly D, all these people actually start saying, are you seeing the same craziness I am? Whether it's on demonetization, whether it's on Facebook, thankfully making sure that fake news is out of my feed. Well, what you're really going to start doing is filtering a bunch of stuff that isn't fake news. Yeah. It's just stuff that's off your narrative. Or Google is going to bury it in their algorithm. So it's going to be there, but it's going to be 7 pages in. You'll never see it.
We got a lot of work to do.